Welcome to the Extraordinary Podcast, where we identify God's uncommon work in common life. Recognizing God's work requires intentionality, but articulating it motivates and inspires. Don't forget to subscribe to never miss an episode. In today's episode, I have a conversation with Dan Miller about how God provides. And even though God's provisions may not be exactly what we would like or plan ourselves, God provides nonetheless. So let's get into my conversation with Dan. Dan, welcome to the podcast today, where we look for God's uncommon work in common life. So thank you for being here today. One of the things that I know about you is farming. And I think a nickname that you sometimes get is Farmer Dan. Can you speak to what life was like growing up for you?
Well, yeah, I grew up obviously on a farm. I grew up on the very same farm that I own today, and grew up in the same house that I was raised in. And I wasn't born there, but I moved in there real shortly thereafter, one with the rest of the clan. I was the youngest of 6 children. And yeah, it was just, we had kind of a traditional type farm in those days, because we had a lot of livestock, but we had a variation. We had chickens, and we had milk cows, and we had stock cows, and we had feeder cattle, and we had hogs, and we never had any sheep when I was growing up. But then, of course, we raised crops too besides. So it was a traditional type Iowa farm, and it was a good life. And then mixed in with that was our church life was very entwined into all that, and we was church goers, man. We went 3 times a week at least, and when there was revivals, we probably rarely missed a single night. And when there was a district function, well, we probably, if it was for our age category, whatever you want to call it, we'd probably be there, like youth camps, and we started out boys and girls camp, and then junior high camp, and then senior high camp, and then all the other district functions that went on. And my wife Lori and I was district layman's retreat directors for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years probably. And so we was very involved in the church. Church has been a part of our life big time for years. And it's been good life. Good life.
Now, one of the things I know that is a passion of yours that goes along with farming is antique tractors. Can you explain how you got into antique, or why that's a passion?
Yeah, I often said when I was, I guess I'm going to back up a little bit here on this one, is I farmed on my own. Well, part was my partnership with my brother after my dad retired. And we farmed together, like my brother and I, for I think it was 11 years, and then we dissolved partnership, not because it's just that we thought it'd be better to be on our own. And then I went on and did that again for about another 10 more years, but then we for us, it just wasn't working. Financially, it wasn't working. And so I had to go get an off-farm job. And I thought it was going to kill me, because that's all I ever wanted to do was be a farmer. Anyway, I survived it, and I guess I lived through it. And I since by the way, I've retired from there. But I got into antique tractors. I would have liked to have done it a lot sooner, because I remember back in the 80s, particularly in the 80s, I'd go to farm sales and stuff, and I'd see these old John Deere tractors selling, and they was old two-cylinder tractors, and them days, they was obsolete. Nobody wanted them. But some of them was really good tractors yet. I mean, they had a lot of life in them. And I often thought, man, I ought to buy some of them and put them in a shed. I think they'd be worth some money someday. But I never did. I never had any money. And so anyway, and then I had an old 2-cylinder tractor that my dad bought new. Way back, I was 2 years old when he bought it. I don't remember it, but I was there, but I don't remember. Anyway, and it was been around our farm all these years. And I ended up with it, and I tried. It was a propane tractor, and it was 2-cylinder John Deere. And propane even made it a little bit more obsolete for people, for anybody that might want it, but they didn't want the propane. They just wanted a gas tractor. Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, I tried to trade it in on stuff, and I tried selling it a few times, and nobody was interested. And then I thought, well, that thing is just taking up shed room, and I got other things I ought to put in there, and I got it out of the shed and parked it out. It was outside for like a year. And I got to thinking, probably that's not such a good thing. Maybe I ought to do something with that tractor someday. And I did eventually. That was my first project, was that restoring that old 620 John Deere propane tractor. And then the bug hit. Mm-hmm. And then, but I also would say that God kind of gives us things that we like. He makes us unique. And one of the things that's unique about me is I'm very boring. I don't like golf, and I don't like fishing, and I don't like hunting, and I don't like race cars, and I don't like horses, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that a lot of people really get into, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it ain't me. So, but I really do like these antique tractors. I could sit and talk to somebody about them things all day long, and they don't even have to be John Deere's, And but the Lord, God makes us that way. He gives us a certain. He makes us like certain things. Some people like to hunt. Some people like to fish. But I probably would never have been able to collect antique tractors and restore them, take the time and the money that it takes to do that, had I not been forced off. I guess I could say I was forced off the farm in the early 90s when I had to go to work at the ordnance plant, because I was almost flat broke. I wasn't really close to losing the farm, but I just could not make enough income to keep everything going. Mm-hmm. And I thought about kill me. Well, one of the things that I've since been able to realize is that off-farm income that I didn't want to do was one of the best things that ever happened to me, and it made life so much more pleasant. And I've had more fun farming since I had to go work at an off-farm job than I ever did before I was farming, because I just was able to free me up to do a lot, do things that I kind of like to do. And I also been able to update my farm and do a lot of work on it and bring it up to where it ought to be. And I often think I'd like to leave it better than I found it, And I think in some ways I will. We've been doing a lot of soil conservation stuff and so forth on it. So anyway, but I'm so blessed when I look back at things and see how God worked. Like I said, I thought I was going to die when I had to go to that job. And about the first 6 weeks or so, I just thought there's got to be something better. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I can't do this. And I started work on the 3rd of January in 1995. I took my off-farm job. At that time, I still had some livestock, but I'd go to work and I'd come home and I'd work some more, and I'd weekends and every day I possibly could. But eventually I kind of got out of the livestock. I worked my way out of them. I didn't just want to sell everything all at once. I just kind of, as it was ready, I sold off, but I didn't keep anything back as replacements. But anyway, but I was working probably, and it was in the wintertime and it was cold, and they had me out in one of those buildings in L Yard there. I don't know if you know anything about the ordnance plant, but it's those buildings right out there by Middletown. And I was running a forklift in there, and it was cold, and my hands were cold, and my feet was cold. I was just miserable. I thought, there's got to be something. What am I going to do? What am I going to do, Lord? This is not what I'm supposed to be doing. And at that, I think I've told this story sometimes. A lot of people have heard this. But here we go. I think that there was one day I just was on that forklift, and I was questioning God, and it wasn't going good. And to this day, to this day, I do believe that the Lord Jesus Christ himself got on that forklift with me that cold day. And I was often think, I even think that maybe he had a pair of insulated coveralls on and a seed corn hat and a pair of boots or something just to make me feel a little more comfortable. And after that day, I kind of had a peace. I didn't know how things was going to work out for sure, but I had a peace that things was going to work out. And not everything was perfect. I mean, I didn't enjoy working every day. There was things it got frustrating at times. And if anything I missed at all, was the independence that you have when you're a farmer. You're your own boss, and you can make your own hours, and sometimes they're long, and sometimes they're not so long. You know, maybe on a cold winter day, you get real cold, you can go in the house, warm up, just call it a day. You know, if you got. But
Especially
anyway,
when you got out of the livestock.
That's what I got out of livestock. Yeah. Well, anyway, after that day, I had a peace. And some of the things that happened that time, Lori was working at a chiropractor's office as a part-time job, and we had what we did at that time. I started raising some sheep, and we got rid of the hogs and the cattle, but I kept the sheep, and I really kind of enjoyed working with them. And Lori but we took a lot of time. And some of the times that Lori would have to go out and help take care of them when I was at work or something. And then she decided that, this is my wife. She decided that she was going to go back to school in her 40s to become an RN, which she did. And it took a lot of grit and a lot of hard work, but she did it. And that was one of the things that really helped us along. That's one of the things God worked out for us, and he was able to make it happen. It didn't happen by itself, but he was able to help us get through that. And then after she got out through school and was working full time, and I was turning down overtime to go home and work with sheep. Finally, we decided, okay, we're going to get out of the livestock business, completely out of the livestock business. And then that freed us up with time-wise a lot more to be doing some of the things that we like to do, like antique tractors. And so then somewhere along about in that same time period there, the church bought this ground out here, about 4 acres out here. And we had a dream session one Sunday night. One of the things we'd like to see happen in our church. And one of them was buy that land out there. At that time, we hadn't bought that yet. It was up for sale. But we wanted to buy it, and I made a suggestion that we buy it, and to help pay for that, we would plant sweet corn out there. And so it's kind of like, okay, you come up with this idea. You're the one that's going to carry it through. And which the first year, it didn't go. We made enough money to pay all expenses, and then it became a missions project after that, which was fine, because when you do it for the Lord, He'll take care of the finances if you trust Him, and the ground got paid for anyway, and the money went to missions, and since that time I've been involved in that program, and that I would call it a ministry, and it's been a lot of work, but a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun watching that corn grow.
And for the record, almost $200,000 have been given to missions from that project.
From that little 4-acre field there, yeah. I wish farming could be that good all over. Anyway, where was I going with that? In the process, also in the process of working at the plant, I was one of my frustrations was I had to go. I also had a lot of debt I was carrying some debt load, and it's kind of like why. And I've always kind of, how you want to say, I would be proud of the fact, or I don't know if I really want to say I'm proud of it. I've always been mindful of the Lord when it come to giving, and we've always way more than tithed. Just when you think about all the other extras, we tithe, and then there's always churches always needing money for something, and I don't begrudge that at all. In fact, I think that's a pretty good place to spend your money if you want to call it that. I don't even want to call it spending. I think it's better than that. But anyway, but I was about broke. And it's kind of, why God? I mean, I thought you were supposed to honor it. I mean, you have all these big TV preachers that talk about all this giving and how wonderful, and your Lord will just pour out blessings on you. Well, He didn't pour out financial blessings on us. There was a lot of blessings, but they weren't financial. And, but I was, through all that, and it took several years, but it's all paid for, and everything's, I don't know how to say wonderful. It's wonderful, but it's definitely paid for, and it's not. We don't have that constant stress. Don't have that constant stress anymore. And I would have, when I was 20, I thought I was going to be a big farmer, and there's a lot of big farmers out there, but I ain't one of them. And but I'm contented. I think I have more fun farming now. I think I said this earlier, but I have more fun farming now than I ever did after I went to work at the plant. You know,
I want to unpack a point you made earlier about the work at the plant, and then Lori's work as RN, and you talk about God providing. You said you continue to be generous even when times were tough, but you continue to financially sacrifice for Jesus and just step out in faith for Him in that. Sometimes I think we get this impression that if we're faithful to Jesus, then He's just going to be, we're not going to have to do anything, and He's going to bless us.
Well, that's so popular message these days.
Yeah, the prosperity gospel, I guess. But your story kind of shows that there are times where God tells us we got to get to work ourselves. So how did you come to grips with that? Because you have a passion for farming. You love it, but God said, you got to do something else. How did you come to grips with God's faithfulness and your efforts?
Well, I guess I could say that hard work never hurt anybody, and I think I see people that they don't seem to have too much, but it's kind of like I work 2 jobs, and my wife worked 2 jobs, and we put, it didn't happen overnight. It takes commitment, and I felt like the Lord blessed me with an able body to do it, and so I think He kind of expected me to. I don't think it hurts you to have to work, sacrifice, and I worked on my days off and on my weekends, and holidays, and other people be taking a trip or something, I was working. If I wasn't working at where I work, I'd work at home, and that's how that.
And one of the things about farming that I'm sure a lesson that you learned very early on is that when it's ready, you got to go now. Like when the harvest is ready, you can't wait. When it's time to plant or spray, you can't say, oh well, we'll get to it later.
Yeah.
And so the work ethic you learned early on.
Yeah.
But I think you would agree that if it's your passion, the work required is different. And so the effort you had to put forth at the plant was a lot different than the effort you put forth on the farm.
I often said that the plant job was my hogs and my cattle. That was my cash flow. I didn't have livestock anymore, but livestock was always been kind of known as a cash flow. Keep your farm up, and so I just kind of tried to think of it as the Ordnance Plant was part of my farming operation, and so I don't know. It seemed like I guess it worked out. I'm since retired, and so I don't have to worry about going to work there anymore. But I can still farm, and it's so easy because I don't have. I said it before. I'll say it, I don't have the constant financial stress that would comes with not being able to pay the bills and try to make a living at it. So we and we're blessed in that area now. So good enough now. We'll probably be able to enjoy our retirement years. You know, we might not be able to go to Florida or Hawaii or anything every year, but we might be able to do that once in a while.
Yeah.
And but the Lord has been faithful in us, and that way. When I realize that if you put your faith and trust in Him completely, you can live in this world, and you can be a part of this. I mean, live in this world and be involved in this world, but yet you don't have to partake in all the sinful things that the world has to offer. Mm-hmm. You can't avoid them; they're going to be around you. You're going to live amongst them, but you don't have to participate. And you can be kind of a witness. And I was able to do that a lot at the plant. I don't know how many people's lives I've influenced, but I'm sure they've seen a difference, because I've been in rooms, I've been around people, sometimes air about turn blue with the way they talk, you know, and the language that they use and stuff. And I could express myself, and I didn't have to use that kind of language. And there's just for instance, I think you probably, I don't know if I've ever told you this story, but some people have heard this story. But I had a good friend of mine I used to work with, and we worked a lot of weekends and nights, and it was most likely just the two of us was together a lot, and we'd get to talking about life, and I was able to share my faith with him some. And so I was, his wife, well, his family was kind of shattered. They had some problems, and he was kind of frustrated with the situation. And I said, man, I don't know. I don't have any answers for you. But I said, if you don't care, we'll just pray. And so I'd say, you know, I'd pray a little bit. And I said, do you want to pray? No. You pray. And so I just pray. And I said, I don't have any answers for you, but I know the Lord does, and He'll figure something out for you. Something will work out for you if you put. And so we did that several times, and then he come down with cancer. He was only in his 50s, and it was pretty bad. I mean, it was pretty fast, and at the same time, my wife was having some difficulty, and I was hurting. I was hurting pretty bad. And one night he calls me up. He says, "Hey," he says, "I know there's a tractor sitting up here along highways for sale." He said, "I thought maybe you might want to become interested in it, but that's not really why he called me." He called me up because at this time he was in pretty bad shape with cancer, and he had got involved in a church, and he'd found the Lord. And he calls me up. He says, "I just want to pray for you and your wife." He just started praying. I couldn't have had anybody pray for me any more about that time than that guy, because I prayed for him, and he didn't think it was, but he just started praying with me over the phone. And he's now, very long after that, he passed away. And I was able to share that with the preacher at the cemetery, that story. So I bet you the preacher told that story a few times. Mm-hmm. But that's okay, because I believe I'll see him in heaven. So anyway, I had to have a little bit of influence or somewhere. And a few other times I talked to some people, and I don't know, might have went in one ear and out the other, I don't know, but I'll let the Lord take care of that, I guess. And
yeah, that's some powerful stuff right there. You've expressed to me many times how God has provided, how God took care of you and your family, and sometimes I think we forget that the places God calls us to go, He's got a way to use us there. And I mean, if you would have drawn up your life early on, you would have always been on the farm, and you could have had a great life. But God had something else for you, and with that, He opened the door for the passion of the antique tractors and relieved a lot of the stress that you were experiencing. And we all still experience stress, no matter how good our situation is.
Right.
But that's so encouraging to hear, because we all, no matter how old we are, we have an idea for how we want our life to work.
Oh yeah.
And that's not always how it works.
No.
But God has a way not just to get us through, but help us to thrive. And sometimes that's as simple as feeling His presence on the forklift. But I do think it's important for us to look back and see, how did God use us where we were? Because you clearly had an influence on this individual that you talked about, and through you, Jesus was able to reach that person.
Yep.
And sometimes it's good for us to step back and get that perspective. So that's a powerful stuff. Thank you for sharing that today. So I want to come back to the antique tractors just a little bit.
That's good. I can talk about antique tractors.
I know. Our time's about to get wrapped up here. So there was a question I didn't get to ask earlier, and I want to make sure you get an opportunity to answer this one. Do you have a favorite tractor?
Yes, I do, for sure. The first one I did, that was kind of a family heirloom. And yeah, it's definitely the favorite. The rest, that tractor, that's going to be handed down to another family member someday. And because and whoever I give it to, I'm going to make sure that I want them to know that I want them to take care of it. Just because it's family heirloom. And but the rest of them, there's a lot of them that's probably a lot better shape, and maybe some that aren't quite as good shape. Once in a while, you think you got something, you find out it's 65 years old or whatever, and it's got a lot of problems. And anyway, but yeah, I do have that one special one. That was one my dad bought new. And but yeah,
Most of the others are just fun.
Yeah, the rest of them are just, and someday, if I don't do it before I die, well, my kids will have to part with them or do whatever they want to them. They ain't interested in them.
And your love for antique tractors, I know in the past you have helped coordinate shows and drives and that type of stuff. And so God can use our passions for His purposes. I know you've given my boys rides on the tractor, and they love that, and that's fun. And just sometimes I think it's just being open to God's movement in our life. That you said you're boring. I don't agree with that, but just the tractors is a fun way that we can connect with people, and sometimes it's humbling. We've got to go work at the plant, and God can use us there. He can provide for us there, and we need to be obedient to His calling. Is there anything else you'd like to share today?
Well, you talked about organizing tractor shows and so forth. When you said it's something that it's your passion, well, a couple of years ago, I got to think about this story a little bit. I know I'm going to be really vague here, but anyway, we had a show out at Westland Mall, and we still got one coming up here in a couple of weeks again. But anyway, I was out there, and that was, my wife was she was hurting. She was having some struggles in life, and I was hurting pretty bad. But the Lord took that tractor show, and He just showed me the goodness of people. I was standing in line buying an ice cream cone or something, and I got up to the window, and I realized I didn't have enough money. And oh, great, So anyway, I just was telling you, you're gonna have to keep it. I don't have enough. I don't have enough money. I don't know what. Anyway, later on, I found a whole bunch in my little pocket. I didn't even. But anyway, a guy behind me, and I don't know who he was. I've never seen him before, and I haven't seen him since. He said, he just paid for that thing for me, and I just floored me. I said, no, you don't have to do that. And he had a little one with him, that. And I didn't think he probably had a lot of money. I don't know what the guy did for a living. I have no idea. But I thought, I don't need this ice cream cone. I can get along without this. And then I went, but after I got done there, I took that ice cream cone and I walked around out there in kind of the center court, and there was a bunch of guys standing out there walking and sitting out there visiting, and I walked up to them and I said, I don't exactly remember what I said, but it just kind of like, somebody just give me an ice cream cone. And somehow the subject got around to just the people. This world is full of pretty good folks. Even they're just good people. And the Lord can just, and he just blessed me that time. I thought about that. In fact, I even kind of tried to write out a testimony about it one time, but I never got anywhere with it. But it just made my day. And I thought, the Lord used the tractor show to put some faith back in me. That it just encouraged me. And so anyway, yeah.
Well, that's great.
That's the Lord we serve. He's a wonderful God, and he knows us personally. He can know us personally. If you don't know him personally, you need to know him personally. And it's not just the background you come from or whatever. God can take you. He can care about your background. He can change your heart and change you from the inside out. Change you from the inside out.
Well, this is powerful stuff today. Thank you for sharing your heart and sharing the transforming work of Jesus. And no matter where anybody is on their spiritual journey, Jesus can help them. Jesus has something for them. Jesus loves them, and your life shows how Jesus continually works. That no matter where we are on the spiritual journey, Jesus is working in our life if we're obedient to him. And he'll meet us where we are, whether it's on the forklift, whether it's at the mall, whether it's on the farm. He'll meet us where we are. And so I want to say thank you for sharing today. Thank you for your words of encouragement and inspiration. I know they've been inspiring to me. I know they're going to be inspiring to others as well. Is there anything else you'd like to share today?
I'd just like to thank my wife for, she's been such a helpmate over the years. And when I had to go to work there, I was feeling pretty low, and she was a strong one. She kept things going in the home and just kind of encouraged me out the door. Once in a while, I think she had about to push me out the door a couple of times. But she's been a major blessing. And I also met her through the church too. By the way, we met at youth camp when we was in senior high camp, and so.
Was your first date at a revival or anything like that?
Well, I was at a youth camp.
Oh, okay.
I probably, the first, they called them dates after the church service in the evening. We called them dates. I don't know exactly what it is, but it was all right. I mean, I'm just glad that I'm just thankful that I was able to be in an environment like that to meet somebody like her, and so I don't know who I would. When I was a teenager, I was headed down the wrong road. And I just thank the Lord that I went to a youth camp. That my senior, I'd actually graduated from high school, and it was a late spring. It was kind of a wet spring, and youth camp was like in first part of June, if I remember correctly. And I was working on the farm, and I was driving tractor in the disc, and it was on a Saturday night, and I thought, you know what, Monday I think I'm just going to go to camp. And I was old enough to drive, and I was pretty much kind of independent then. But I think I'm just going to go to youth camp. And that was where, and I grew up in the church, I told you I was in revival meetings and all that kind of stuff. But that year at youth camp is when I made in my mind I was going to live for the Lord. And I don't know where I'd be today if I wouldn't have went to that youth camp. I wouldn't have met my wife probably, and it's in the Lord's hands working.
That's right.
And since that time, let me tell you, I haven't been perfect. I've failed the Lord a few times, but I guess He understands me, and He's always been faithful, drawn me back in, and didn't let me get too far out of His will, and so.
We're a work in progress, and we serve a gracious God.
That's right.
That is for sure. So, but Dan, thank you for sharing today. We appreciate you as we look for God's uncommon work in common life. So thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this podcast. Be on the lookout for how God does uncommon work in common life. And please subscribe to never miss an episode.